How do you make EVP more accessible? Now, on this podcast, I often talk about how business critical it all is for organizations. And when you're looking at things like $8 trillion in lost productivity due to disengaged employees, and EVP is really important. So that's exactly what I'm chatting with Vicki Saunders today. How you doing, Vicki?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Good to see you again. I think last time was Wreckfest or
probably Wreckfest in the middle of the
and then
field.
LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, as I see you often there. So thanks for getting involved in the content I post on there and get involved in the podcast. It's great. Let's start off with just a bit of an intro about yourself, Vicki.
Yeah, so I'm Vicki. I'm originally a marketeer. So I spent quite a long time in the advertising team at Boots. Made 64 TV ads. Gosh. And did most of the Here Come the Girls ads, that kind of thing. So I am like pretty much a marketeer, really, and I've ended up in HR. And but I think that really puts me in quite a position of being able to put a different angle on things in the industry, because I'm absolutely, passionate about making sure we've got the right evidence, diagnostics, measurement, analytics to be able to prove the return on investment that we do. I come at proposition development from a customer point of view, because that's what I used to do, developing new pharmacy services for Boots. And there's a hell of a lot that goes into like advertising that we can learn from in the employer branding and EVP development. But yeah, I am a marketeer originally. I was at Boots for 16 years. I was at BAE Systems for 18 months. I talk about jumping from sun creams to submarines. So I set up the employer brand function at BAE Systems. They didn't have anything before that. So I built a team of 7 and brought the recruitment marketing in-house from the RPO, who were AMS. And then more recently, I've been at Currys. And my role's been a bit broader, actually, which has been absolutely fascinating. So it's about EVP, employer brand, employee experience, and culture and values. So yeah, it's gone a lot more lateral across the different areas of the organisation than it just being about attraction.
Nice. And we talk about accessibility and making EVP more accessible. That for me, suggests that there are maybe roadblocks and barriers, to entering the world of EVP. Well, let's talk a bit about that. What are those blocks and barriers typically that you see?
So first of all, I think organisations and senior leadership teams probably don't understand what EVP is. And if I have to give my shortest version, my elevator pitch, I think of it as being like turning up in the Dragon's Den without a customer proposition. I mean, why would you do that? And so many organisations don't put the same thought into what their employee proposition is. And to me, it's the same. It's just as critical. So I think it's about, first of all, demonstrating the power of EVP. And then there's misconceptions as well. So it's not just even about lack of understanding. I think we're a bit naughty as an industry, because we talk about the words EVP and employer brand almost interchangeably, and they're fundamentally different. And so often people talk about an EVP as being a stepping stone to an employer brand. It's almost like, let's get through this bit so that we can do the employer brand bit, and then that will help us with our attraction, But if you take EVP back to its foundational, fundamental level, it's as much about tackling attrition as it is about addressing and attracting people to the organisation. So those are some of the stumbling blocks. Then I think it sits in HR, generally, EVP. Sometimes it sits in comms, and comms can sometimes sit in marketing, but generally it sits in HR. But it does need quite a lot of understanding of research methodologies to be able to know how to develop an EVP. And that's not a core skill set for an HR professional. And I often think HR professionals get really excited about doing an EVP. It's like been waiting for years to do it, and it's just not come up at the right time in the organisation that they're in. And so when they are actually ready to go, it's almost a little bit, oh, how do we go about this then? Because suddenly you've got the buy-in, and then there's a lot riding on it, isn't there? Once you've finally got the buy-in from the leadership team. But knowing how to do it, how to ensure that you follow best practice, that you actually address the issues that the organisation is facing in the people space through that work, is quite a big task on people's shoulders. I've heard some horror stories. Thankfully, not in any of the 3 organisations where I've touched EVP. I've heard horror stories though of organisations
Go on, do tell.
spending,
Go on, let's say.
spending 100, 150 grand, maybe 200 grand developing an EVP that they don't actually activate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bloody expensive PowerPoint presentation, isn't it?
Yeah,
Seriously,
it's true.
it's interesting, it's insightful, it's nice to know, but if you don't actually activate it and do anything with it, then it really was a bit of an indulgence.
That's I often say is like, you don't want your answer to be, yeah, we have a slide deck. We might have a banner stand up in the foyer and maybe a banner on the homepage of the career site, but ultimately you've paid, yeah, goodness, tens of hundreds of thousands of pounds for, I don't know, maybe reassurance or box ticking, a bit of both. I don't know, but you're absolutely right.
So you need to put as much effort into activating it as you do into developing it. And sometimes I've also heard and seen people, the development is so all consuming, takes so much of your time and energy to coordinate that, the project team, the stakeholders. The stakeholders is the bit that takes the time. Actually the actual doing the research side and doing your analysis of the competitors within the talent space for that particular organization, that's all relatively straightforward. It's being able to take all of these stakeholders with you that takes the time. And so it's quite intense, and so people almost get to the point and go, oh, phew, we've done it, we've got there, we've got the EVP, hooray! Like you say, put it on the career site. People might think about, let's ensure it's on the intranet, let's ensure that it's on our benefits portal or wherever else. They don't truly activate it, and then almost the last part of it, which I find really hard to swallow, is that they forget to measure it. They haven't measured stuff in advance to ensure you've got a run rate of data to say, oh, what was our attrition rate before we did this? What was our engagement like on social before we did it? What was our ENPS score, our ESAT score? Do you know any of these things? They've not gone, well, what was it like first? Then let's activate the EVP and see what it's like 6 months later. So, it requires, I suppose, a little bit of somebody who's been through it and experienced some of those pitfalls is how I'm hoping I can help people, really.
So if we talked about and removing those obstacles, what would you say? You're talking to somebody about kind of those kind of key principles to follow to make sure that actually people can enter the world of EVP without having to spend, say, tens of hundreds of thousands of pounds and only have like a slide deck and not much else to show for it.
There's a fair bit of groundwork first, I'm afraid. It isn't just jumping with both feet. I think the first thing is to think really carefully about what you want your EVP to achieve. So which problems or issues do you want it to tackle, or which opportunities do you want it to help you unlock? Because you would design the methodology for your EVP around those specific issues. So for example, at BAE Systems, our business case was more around workforce demographics, particularly from a gender point of view. So BAE Systems, as the biggest manufacturer in the UK, are committed to achieving 30% of the workforce being female by 2030. But that's quite a big challenge. Attraction actually isn't too much of an issue, and nor was attrition. But so the whole business case for both the EVP and the employer brand activity was about trying to address those workforce demographics. But then it was different when I got to Currys. Actually, the workforce demographics are less of an issue, but there are some kind of some areas of the business with quite high attrition, especially in high volume roles, frontline roles. And so actually the business case for EVP at Currys was more around tackling early attrition in the organisation. But I needed to be able to quantify the impact of both of those things. What was the opportunity cost, or what was the actual cost to the business of not achieving, or being where they wanted to be in either of those spaces. So when you look at the EVP, you need to think to yourself, right, if it's about driving greater diversity in the demographics of the workforce, you would build your whole methodology differently. You would have to ensure that you over-egg the number of the demographic that you want in the future into the research. So for example, if you've got 10% today of your workforce are female, I think it was 19% at BAE at the time, but they want to get to 30%, you would need to force fit the people that you put into focus groups and do your survey with, because otherwise you'll end up with the same representation in the future than you've got today, and that's not what you want. Do you know what I mean? So it really is very specific about the methodology that you use. The other thing is about what works culturally in the organisation. Is it the type of organisation where, regardless of levels of seniority, hierarchy, politics, you can pull loads of people together into a room for a hackathon, get flip charts, post-it notes. Haribos are always really important in hackathons. Is it that type of organisation where you can run activation workshops and go really blue sky and everybody's comfortable? There's loads of psychological safety. Innovation is at the core of the culture. You would then approach how you do it like that. If you have an organisation which is more siloed, very hierarchical, then you probably wouldn't do a hackathon. It would probably go down like a lead balloon. You're probably going to need to think about engaging people. This isn't about right or wrong. This is just about working with the organisation as to where it is at today. You probably would need to engage people within smaller groups of, directors together, it doesn't fit beautifully with me from a values point of view, but you've got to start with where the organisation is. So those are two of the things that I would think about when starting out on the EVP journey.
Yeah, I really like what you say about adjusting depending on the organisation, because I think ultimately, if you're not like addressing key issues within an organisation, then you're not going to get buy-in, because it's the classic be a painkiller, not a vitamin, approach you need to take. But then also, if you try and take a format, a framework, and just try and force it into a company, and I've seen and heard of agencies do this, it doesn't quite fit. And so therefore it's just not going to take root properly. So I really like what you say about adapting it. So it ultimately does what we want this kind of stuff to do, which is take root in an organization and be seen as being absolutely business critical to what that organization does. What have you what's been your kind of biggest learning from doing all those TVCs for Boots? How many did you say it was? How many ads did you do?
64.
64. What was the kind of, what was the, I mean, you might have touched on some of it already, but given that's kind of, kind of big part of the beginnings for you, what is it? I know you got PR as well there in the background, but what do you learn from doing all those TVCs for a company like Boots?
Crikey. Biggest one, I think, is about understanding your audience, targeting and segmentation. Because if you don't do that, you just create lots of waste. You're just spending money trying to, appeal to the wrong audience. And, it's a good, is it 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, when I was at the height of making TV ads, you had to put all your eggs in one basket, you weren't quite sure. You're never still not 100% sure, but you do whatever you could to ensure it would be right. You're going to put your 30-second ad out on, Coronation Street ad break. It's going to cost you 50 grand just to air it. It's probably cost you 150 grand to make the ad. 50 grand to just air it the once, by the way, not over and over again.
Absolutely.
Going into millions there.
Right? Yeah.
I find, it's actually so much easier now that everything's digital. So when companies do make TV ads, even now, they will test the script on customers in advance before they shoot the film. They shoot multiple versions of every take within a film for obvious reasons, and they will test it. They will test it before they air it, And now we've got digital comms, and we can not just A/B test things. We've got multivariant testing, so we don't have to have all our eggs in one basket. But I still think employer branding is still working in that mentality of having one execution. Now, an execution isn't a whole campaign. That's just one execution. You if you want to tell a story, I always think of it as being episodic. It's building over time, like Coronation Street, and the more you see stuff across different channels with a slightly different, chapter in the book, the story that you're trying to tell, the more impactful it would be. Because what I see in employer branding is a real harsh focus on reach and not enough focus on frequency. And frequency is really critical. If you do make TV ads, the media buying agencies have the most slick software in the world to determine the optimal frequency. So it will ask you questions about the complexity of the message, So things like when I used to make TV ads for, Advantage Card, Triple Points this weekend at Boots, right? Triple Points this weekend in Boots is a 10-second film, and you literally only need to see it once because it's simple. It does what it says on the tin. When I was making Sultan TV ads and I needed to talk about 5-star UVA, that had to have a frequency of 5 to 6. Do you know what I mean? And it's that next level of thinking and detail. The other thing about multivariant testing that I love, because I like geeking out on it, is how many ways you can split it. We're saying about audience and segmentation. If you start looking at your data of what you're putting out from an employer branding point of view, and you look at what's doing well on a Monday, what's doing well on a Friday night, what's doing well in the middle of the day, don't stop there. Look at what's happening differently in Glasgow versus London. Never just test anything only in London, because London always behaves differently from a media response point of view to the rest of the country. But you can be looking for all kinds of patterns to be able to optimize the campaign. Switch your budget out of, Tuesday morning's rubbish for us, put it into Friday night, or whatever works for you. But that's the key, is being able to put out lots of different executions, find out which ones are working by geography, by time, by day of the week, by whatever you like, and then optimize by moving your budget around.
Oh my goodness, there's so much to unpack there. That's great. I think that's definitely another episode. I mean, because there's absolutely. I mean, it's just actually just this morning, and it's probably the 5th time I've spoken about it this week. I don't even know what day it is. It's Tuesday. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah. Is that thing about creating quality content at scale and treating it like a program of content, and therefore you base it on series, based on episodes, so everything is interconnected, albeit different as well. So, but getting that scale is so important, but it's often very restricted because of, in the same way that entry point to EVP, entry point into content production, I think is often very, very high. Doesn't have to be that way.
It's a bit bonkers. I agree with you. There is that entry level of, we're going to have to do a shoot. It's going to cost this much money. Blah 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 blah. Now, in consumer marketing, they will spend, typically, you spend about 15%, 15, on your content production, 85% on your media, because your media is your eyeballs to get to the content. You know, this idea of, oh, let's make a hero film and put it on the career site, everybody will find it. Rubbish, they won't.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not on the career site. Yeah.
It's absolutely bonkers. But by the same token of that barrier to entry, the other thing I see happening is changing the creative too often. You know, I think we get bored of it as marketeers, as employer branders, way before our audience does. And so we go, oh, what's this year's grads campaign? Well, you kind of go, hang on a minute. What was last year's grads campaign? Oh, actually, it was this. And did it work? Yeah, then we'll use it again, because it's a totally different audience this year. Those grads who we were trying to attract last year are already into their grad programs now, or, 80, 90% of them are. So let's reuse the creative if it worked. Mars used Work, Rest and Play for 37 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic. Absolutely.
I'm on my soapbox now, Chris. Sorry.
No, it's good. I think it's really interesting to see what's happening now, because I think with the rise of programmatic last decade and massive focus on performance marketing is now being restricted because of various privacy issues, and targeting relies more on higher quality content, valuable content to the people you're actually serving it to then be able to retarget those people. So I think there's something about, got to get that volume. As long as you have this kind of editorial direction, strategic direction to all the content, then it can look different. But you're right, it's this thing about maybe it's individuals and it's maybe agencies wanting to make sure that they are doing new things to show value. It's like, right, we need to, the world is agile, the world is always moving, so therefore we need to change this. Now, there could be some cynicism there about as to why that is being done, but I think there is that thing about wanting to change, and actually you can change your content without changing. Oh my goodness, this is another conversation. Branding, brand identity, branding. I mean, goodness me, like they too often get mistaken, but I think getting that volume is really important. And you only have to look at YouTubers, and I'd say this often, look at what YouTubers do, and their volume enables them to understand what works and what doesn't, but they don't necessarily change angle just like that. They're just adjusting it. So, and I think, so reason for saying that about the whole thing around performance and programmatic is I think there's then going to be more onus on actually making sure that percentage spent on content is increased, so that then when you do let it drop on social, then it's going to fly more. So I just think the world of organic versus paid, I think, should be blurred, really, unless you're a massive brand or an influencer who's going to have viral content most of the time. You need to make sure that content is seen by the right people through various paid channels. And it's really interesting to see what's happening with TikTok, and it's called the TikTokification of social media, where actually the algorithms are going back to maybe being more organic and democratic. So therefore, there's more importance on testing the content organically to then put out in paid. But yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I knew there was a reason I wanted to get you on. You're always a good chat, Vicki. Really appreciate it. But yeah, I think definitely these are themes that we'll definitely pick up again in the podcast. And thank you. I really appreciate your time. And it's been good to chat.
Thanks, Chris.